Hi everybody. In this tutorial we're going to prep our data for analysis, clean it up, and do a little labeling and those types of things. Let's get data started. First, let's set our working directory, and let's read in that data set that we created last time. So again, we have a small data set with 5 variables in it. Notice that it automatically, when we read our data in last time, it gave some labels, and they're just simply the variable name in uppercase letters. So let's add a little bit more descriptive label first. So if you go under data and you go under the data utilities, you'll see that there's this label utilities, and this is the one we want, is to label the variable. So if you click on that box, that command, a little box comes up. We can attach a label to a variable or remove a label from a variable. So we want to attach. Let's pick ID, and let's call that participant ID, and click OK. So you immediately see, so it issues the command label variable, then the name of the variable, and then whatever you want the new label to be in double quotations, and you immediately see that over here it has the appropriate participant ID variable. So let's just add a label for all of our different variables. So I'm going to have my cursor in the command window. I'm going to use that page up that we talked about before. So that just allows me to go up through my commands. That's page up, page down, page down. So it allows you to scroll through your previous commands. So I brought up the last one. I'm just going to double click this and type in sex. And then here I'm going to say, participant sex. And then to make it a little easier on us, why don't we tell it that 0 equals female and 1 equals male, and hit enter. So now that gets added. We can do the same thing for the other 3 variables in our data set. Race, type today, participant race, 0 is non-white, and 1 is white. Hit enter. Page up. Let's do age. And here we'll say participant age in years. And then finally, let's do our variable for our smoking variable. Smoke. And we'll call that smoke stage. 1 equals never smoker. 6 equals established smoker. Okay, so you can see we now have labels, for descriptive labels for all of our variables, and that's great. So the list command, list, allows you to just look at your data. So when I issue the list command, it shows the variable names and all this. And then you can either click that with your mouse, left click, or you can hit spacebar. But notice that it didn't actually put the labels in there. It only included the variable names. So that's not very helpful. But if we say tab sex, that's one that does use the label. So now it says, instead of having sex right here, it says participant sex 0 equals female, 1 equals male. So that's kind of nice. You can see that you've got 48 women and 52 men in your data set. It's not clear to me which commands use the label and which don't, and as far as I understand, you can't really override that. Stata just chooses whether to use the variable name or the variable label. So in the tables, it uses the labels, and in the list command, where you just print out your data, it still uses a variable name. And As far as I know, that's out of our control as users. It just does it as it sees fit, but maybe somewhere deep in the documentation there's a way to figure that out. So that's great. We now have a descriptive label, but the problem is this label is kind of long, and what I really would like to add is value labels, where I basically, instead of showing me a 0 in this table or in this list, it actually says female and male. And we can do that. That's a value label. So if we go up to data, we go under utilities, and we say manage value labels. So if you click that one, this little box comes up, and we want to create a label. And so we have to enter a name for the label. So let's call it sex. And let's say that a 0 is female. We'll add that. And a 1 is male. And we add that. And then click OK. So you can see now that that invoked this text, label define. This is the name of the label, sex. 0 is this, 1 is that. So we've created that label. Now we need to add that to this particular variable sex. And so go back to your label, and right underneath manage value labels, there's assign value label to variables. So click that. We want to attach a value label to variables. The variable we want is sex, and the value label we want is sex. So click OK. And you can see it says label value sex. So this part didn't change. This doesn't look any different. But now when I issue that list command, notice that instead of showing 0s and 1s, it now shows the value label. That's kind of cool. And then second, if I look at the table for sex, we see now instead of having a 0 and 1, it says female and male. Also, since we're going to use the value labels here, they don't really need to be in here, and we really don't want to use up this much room. So actually, I don't know that I want to have all these in here. So let's go back up and let's revise our labels and just call that one participant sex. I'm using my mouse now. I'll click on that. Let's call that one participant race. So you can see I can easily, that one's still fine, I can easily override any of these just by reissuing the command. Now when I look at my sex variable, I have a nice descriptive label here, participant sex, 48 women, 52 men. So let's go back now and let's do our value labels for race and smoke. So again, I'm just going to take this and let's define a value label for race. 0, recall, was non-white, and 1 was white. Issue that. And then I just assign that to my race variable. And then we'll do the same thing for our smoke stage. Now, unfortunately for smoke stage, it's going to go real long. So I'm actually not going to use this. I'm going to go back up here and show you that I can use the labeling. So to, again, manage the value labels, I'm going to add one called smoke. Oh, no, I don't want, sorry. Create label, smoke stage. 1 is never smoker. Sorry. 2 is a what we call a trier. Okay, let's start this over here. I don't know what I did. So let's create a label. It's called smoke stage. 1 is never smoker. Add that. 2 is trier. I don't know what I did there, but we'll get her fixed up. 3 is less than monthly smoker. So here's a good example where these numbers really don't mean anything on their own. I know that as the number gets higher, their smoking level increases, but I don't really remember what they mean operationally. So by adding these descriptive value labels, you can really get a better sense as you're looking at your data what each one means. So now I've created that label. Now let's add that label to our variable. So smoke gets the smoke stage. Okay, so now if I type in my list command, you'll see that it shows my sex variable, male, female, my race variable, white, non-white, and my smoke variable, and it actually lists out the level instead of all those different numbers. And again, I really like this when I look at my variables in tabular format, because now I can quickly see that this is what we call smoke stage, and it's got these things and everything makes sense. So that's great. Now let's go back to the list. By the way, I don't have to show all 100. I can just have it list persons 1 through 10, so I don't have to keep hitting that more button. We have an ID variable and an age variable. It doesn't make sense really to add any value labels to age because that's a continuous variable, so that doesn't need it. Our ID variable is really arbitrary and we don't really use it for much, but notice when I went down, did you guys see this part? Notice that it doesn't actually list out the actual value once they get up to be above a certain amount. So once we got up above these 5, it went to 6, it doesn't show them anymore. Part of that is because the ID variable, when we read it in, it just default formatted it to 8.0. So 0 positions after the decimal and 8 positions before. And then by default, when I do the list, it cuts them off at this point. I can actually change these formats, and you can do this for any variable, but this is a variable where we may want to do that. So if I look under Variables Manager, so you can see it gives me a little table. It shows now that I have my 5 variables. It lists out what my label is for each one. It shows that for these 3 variables, I created a value label for them. And then notice under ID that it's formatted as 8.0. So, and that's right here. I can just change that. So I can change that to 10.0 and then just say apply. And it just created this little formatting variable. Now, when I do list, excuse me, it doesn't actually apply that notation anymore. So if you want to see that, usually I don't mess around with the formatting stuff, but once we get into really big data sets, sometimes it makes a lot of sense to start trimming those down if you don't need those extra spaces. But for the most part, I don't mess with them. So just to recap, we covered how you can add descriptive labels to your variables and showed that some commands use them, some don't. We added value labels to our categorical variables, sex, race, and smoke. We first had to create the label itself, and then we have to apply that to the specific variable that it goes to. And then finally, we covered the fact that under the Variables Manager, you can change some other aspects of your variables, like the format. That's it for now. Thanks.